Hey, YouTube theologians. Pastor Wolfmueller here, driving to church thinking about something, so I want to just drop it here, mostly so I don't forget it, but maybe then you guys can kick back. So here's a draft of an idea. I'm thinking about how it is that we navigate all of the various arguments that we're in as Christians. And I've used to have the picture, I still do, of the multiple battle lines, but I've got a kind of a new thing that I want to add to it. So the multiple battle lines picture is the idea that sometimes depending on the battle that we're fighting against someone that the next day we might be fighting with them, along with them. So now we're fighting, okay, so to take for example, if the question is a moral question of abortion, we might be fighting together with all the Christians, all people. Even there's, these pro-life atheists and things like this, where depending on that, if we're fighting for that issue, all the people we're fighting with are all those people who want to support the Lord's gift of life in the womb and try to bring an end to this murder of children. But then, so say we're marching along with the Catholics for abortion, but then we start to talk about, say, the unique authority of the Scriptures. Well, now we're fighting against the same people that we were marching with, because there's a different battle line. And so there's all these various different battle lines. And so we find ourselves in the very awkward situation of rejoicing in someone's argument one day and then opposing someone's argument the next day. We rejoice in the arguments, for example, that our friends in the Baptist church put together for the doctrine of the Trinity. Maybe they're arguing with the Jehovah's Witnesses and doing some apologetic work. But then we argue against them when it comes to the conversation about baptism. We argue, we rejoice, for example, what would we agree with the ELCA? I'm sure there's something that we agree with the ELCA, but then we start to talk about all the sort of rejection of biblical authority and errors in the Scripture, and we're arguing with them there. So depending on the conversation, we have to have this nimbleness to fight with and against at the same time. And that is somewhat disorienting. And I think what happens is people just they'll settle into a particular battle line. Like the edge of Christianity, which is maybe the most important battle line. Are you saved or are you not? Do you believe in Jesus or do you not? And people will recognize that battle line as the chief battle line, and they refuse to fight any battles behind them. I'm only going to fight here on the edge of Christianity. So the non-denominational church makes this move and says, hey, we're just going to fight this, and everything else we're just going to leave behind. In fact, that's probably the impulse of what makes somebody non-denominational. But Jesus has not authorized us to neglect the battles behind. You got to decide if you're going to baptize a baby or not. You got to say what it is that you're having in the Lord's Supper. So the Lord, when he says beware of false doctrine, when he gives us his teaching, he is sort of giving us this range of arguments to have. And this is maybe why I'm thinking about it, because I think that, at least, let me speak for myself, I want to cultivate, there's kind of a grace at which we move between these different battles. And so here's the picture that I want to add to it today, why I'm dropping this video, is that I need to be better at feasting with my enemies and fighting with my friends. So we only want to fight our enemies and feast with friends, but we got to be able to do the opposite. We got to be able to rejoice with our enemies where we find agreement, and we got to be able to fight with our friends where we find disagreement. Because this is what faithfulness to the Lord's word requires. We got to be able to recognize the gifts that the Lord has put out there beyond our own whatever, and rejoice in the truth that we find wherever we find it. And then we also got to be ready to argue about things. So here I'm fighting with one man, I'm fighting with him in regards to defending the doctrine of the Trinity, and I'm fighting against him in regards to baptism. I'm fighting with someone in regards to the authority of Scripture, and I'm fighting against them when it comes to the doctrine of election, and so forth and so on. Now, the reason why I think this is kind of important for me is because the evangelistic and apologetic edge of the church is where it's kind of, I'm always interested, but a lot of my own thinking and writing, like Has American Christianity Failed, grew up in that battle line between the Lutherans and the other Christians, especially the other Protestants. So I kind of sharpened my sword at that battlefront, but I want to be able to, fight beyond it and pull back and fight on the other side as well, feasting with foes and fighting with friends. So as we meditate on the Lord's Word and rejoice in His gifts, that's the picture that I'm working with this morning, and I hope that's helpful for you. I'd love to hear, again, I'm drafting this idea, so your thoughts and your comments below will be really fantastic and helpful for me. So thanks for being part of the conversation. We're doing the Lent Up Early What Not the podcast too, by the way, so if you're not subscribed to the podcast, every day during Lent, trying, so far so good, to have a little meditation on the Scripture and answer one of your questions. So that's hanging around at What Not the Podcast. You can find that at the website as well. Someone remind me, I'll put a link to it in the description. Thanks. Hey, God's peace be with you.